Hello, and welcome to vlog number 1, Skills and Capacities in the Weight Room. First of all, I will explain what a skill and a capacity is. A skill is something which can be learnt by an athlete, and therefore can be practiced over and over again in order to achieve a perfect technical model of the skill. On the other hand, a capacity relates to the athlete's structure and function of their body. Some examples of this include the athlete's flexibility, their anatomy, their body mass, and their ability to produce force. We will now take a look at Athlete 1, carrying out a back squat. When looking at this squat, we can immediately notice that when the athlete is going through the downward phase of the squat, there is a very obvious knee valgus. This can be seen in every repetition. When freezing the image at the bottom of the squat, we can really notice the knee valgus in the first repetition. Furthermore, we can see how the athlete's feet are also not parallel to each other. We can also notice the bar and how it is lower on the athlete's left-hand side as opposed to her right-hand side. This could be due to muscular tightness of the athlete's left-hand side. Therefore, it might be true that this squat might have been negatively affected by a capacity. However, when discussing the squat with the athlete and explaining what went wrong, she attempted the squat one more time. In this set, we can see that the knee valgus has disappeared almost completely, showing it was a lack of skill shown by the athlete. Her feet positioning, although still not parallel to each other, seems much better too, and the bar is also at a much better angle as it seems straighter. We can then freeze the image at the bottom of the squat to compare the difference between one set and the other. Once the clear and obvious has been removed, we can then analyze the squat from the side. Here we can see that the athlete maintains a straight back and has a relatively good depth. There is also a good range of motion of the ankle. However, the heel seems to just come off the ground. In general, the athlete seemed to have a skills deficit, which was very easily corrected, and was then able to carry out a squat at a decent level. However, correcting the skill of the squat did seem to bring up some potential capacity problems, which were dealt with separately. Now, we will move on to athlete number 2, performing the squat. From the front angle, the athlete seems to descend very quickly and ascends very rapidly too. This could be due to a relatively easy weight on the bar, or a lack of skill shown by the athlete. It could also be due to a lack of motor control. Each time the athlete descends, he does a good job in avoiding knee valgus and keeping the bar level and not leading into a side. However, the athlete does not seem to get much depth in his squat. This can be seen more when the video is slowed down. At his lowest point of the squat, the athlete can be seen with the finishing position higher than what is seen as the perfect technical model. This could be an issue coming from the hip mobility, knee mobility, and/or ankle mobility. When looking at the athlete complete the squat from the side, you can see that the depth is once again not achieved, and his heels lift slightly off the ground. This means he might be lacking ankle mobility. The athlete is recovering from an injury affecting his ankle, and is therefore limited by the range of motion around the ankle joint. This shows a clear capacity deficit, and should therefore carry out ankle mobilization exercise in order to improve this lack of movement capacity. We will now take a look at athlete 1, complete a deadlift. From the beginning of the movement, the athlete does not place herself in an appropriate position to begin the lift. The bar is not close enough to the body prior to the pull. Her thoracic spine is not extended, and the grip seems to be a little too wide for the deadlift. As the pull starts, the athlete does not drag the bar along her leg. From the front, you can see that there is a large degree of cervical extension. This highlights that there is a very evident lack of skill in the execution of the deadlift. Looking at the lift from a side-on view highlights many more technical issues in the execution of the deadlift. Here we can stop and examine the 3 stages of the lift in more detail. For example, at the start of the lift, we can see there is a curvature of the back which should not be there, especially around the thoracic section. The bar is also not close enough to the body when the lift begins, as is highlighted on the front view. The shoulders are very curved and rounded forwards. This is due to the thoracic flexion of the spine. During the middle section of the lift, you can see there is still a thoracic flexion and cervical extension. This could place a lot of stress on both the back and the neck when carrying out the deadlift. Additionally, the athlete's shoulders are still rounded, and this still comes from the lack of extension along the spine. However, the athlete does seem to keep the bar closer to her body during this part of the lift. At the top of the lift, it is harder to identify any faults in the athlete's skill, but as the circle shows, there is still a slight degree of thoracic flexion. This leads to rounded shoulders, as opposed to the athlete bringing out the chest and extending the spine slightly, which would then in return bring her shoulder blades backwards. All these issues seem to be deriving from a lack of skill in the deadlift technique. We will now see athlete number 3, who will also carry out a deadlift. From the front, we can identify many skill-based issues. However, the technique seems to be a little bit better than that of athlete 1 in the previous video. From this angle, it is apparent that there is a slight degree of flexion in the spine. This could be from a lack of flexibility of the hamstring, which requires the athlete to flex at the spine in order to produce force to lift the weight from the floor. This would in turn lead to a lot of the force production coming from the mid to lower back, as opposed to giving the force from the legs to produce the lift. Now, we shall take a look at athlete 3 carry out the deadlift from a side-on view. Here, we can notice once again the thoracic flexion, especially at the lowest point of the deadlift. This further demonstrates a capacity issue relating to the hip and the role of the hamstring in the lift. There is an apparent lack of flexibility, which might be pulling on the back, and this would lead on to the curvature of the back during the lowest point of the lift. The athlete was therefore advised to carry out appropriate hamstring strengthening and mobility exercises to help them achieve the desired technique. At the top of the deadlift, the athlete seems to not be able to fully achieve hip extension. This seems to come from weak glute activation. The athlete was therefore given glute strengthening exercises and hip mobility exercises in order to help them achieve the desired technique. In summary, it is apparent that all the athletes I have seen in this video need a little bit of work done on their skills in order to achieve a perfect technical model. However, as shown with athlete 1 during the squat, skills can potentially be very easy to correct. On the other hand, capacities are much harder to identify and can often be confused with a lack of skill in the technique. Also, capacities seem to show more when the skill deficits are fixed, as it is often the case that the reason why the athlete carries out the skill in a wrong manner is due to a hidden capacity issue. They also take much more time to correct, and it is often down to the athlete putting in the effort themselves to fix the problem. This is now the end of the vlog. Thank you for listening.